Actually live.
We're live now.
Oh, we're live, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nkiru Balong. I'm welcome to the third session of the Africa Soft Power series, The Future of Sport and Live Entertainment. The overall theme of this inaugural session is content, culture, and platforms, where is the money? And we will be hearing from thought leaders passionate about Africa, about how the continent can harness its soft power effectively to advance strategic interests and shape global conversations. And considering the world that we're living in today, we're going to be situating the entire series on the creative power of Black people everywhere. For me personally, sports is particularly important, not just as a tool for social economic development. It's also important because it teaches us discipline and self-love. I mean, imagine if every African leader could run around a football field, perhaps we'll have more discipline. And then also for its potential to unite us as Africans. I mean, if I think about it, if Nigeria is not playing, then I support Ghana. If Ghana is not playing, then I support any other African team. And if there's no African team, I support a team that has Black people. And if there are no Black people, then, well, I don't really watch. So before I just jump into it, I want to say thank you so much to our strategic partners and our media partners for supporting this project wholeheartedly. We're deeply grateful. And of course, a huge thank you to our moderator for this session, Mr. Peter Okwoche, who is an award-winning senior journalist presenter for the BBC World News Television and BBC World Radio Service. He has interviewed many of the continent's presidents and heads of states, and recently led BBC's biggest expansion across West Africa. You also probably know him from Focus on Africa. Before I hand over to Mr. Okwoche, my co-convener, Obi Asika, will say a few words.
Thank you so much, NQ. I'm just really excited about this panel. I want to welcome all the panelists. It's a wide group of experts with different approaches in different sports. But I think everybody is working in the same general direction about how to elevate and professionalize African sports and our opportunities on the continent. So I'm really excited. Love to welcome you all and looking forward to a great panel. Peter, over to you, man.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say thanks for having all of us, myself included, alongside the panelists. Sports is something that we know Africa loves. We're very passionate about our sporting teams, about our sporting stars. And unfortunately, at this point, COVID-19 seems to have put a stop to a lot of the things that we enjoy doing. And not only on the continent, of course. What's happening outside the continent is also reverberating on the continent. So we've got, like Obi said, we've got a fantastic panel here this evening to be talking to you guys about where Africa stands now when it comes to live sports and how Africa can actually maximize this COVID-19 period and do things, maybe do things differently so that we make sure that we're moving forward along with the rest of the world. Because believe me, the rest of the world is moving along. I mean, we've seen across several European countries where, despite the severity of COVID-19 in those countries, football leagues have resumed, basketball leagues have resumed, cricket has resumed. You know, it's just a few of the sports that we really love. And then the sporting events, of course, we know that Tokyo 2020 has been moved by a year. Hopefully, it will be taking place next year. So outside of Africa, people are putting steps in place to make sure that when it is time, that sports hasn't lost as much as it could have lost due to the pandemic. And I think Africa needs to be not only tagging along, but spearheading some of those innovations as we move along. So once again, I want to thank you. Before we start, I just want to introduce the panelists. I know some of us know each other. Some of us might not really know each other. So you'll have to forgive me if I do take just a little bit of time to introduce everyone here on the panel today. I'm going to start with Usher Komugisha. She's a Ugandan multimedia journalist that has a passion for covering sports in Africa. She currently works as a basketball writer for Fiba, that's the International Basketball Association Federation. She's an African football reporter for Soccer Africa, a leading magazine show on the continent, airing on Super Sports every week. She is also an analyst on MTV Press Box, which was voted the best sports show in Uganda for 2 years straight. That's in 2018 and 2019. And Usher is somebody that I had been hearing about for a very long time, but never really met her until we met in Cairo last year. And I know that she is well respected everywhere you go to. Usher is very well respected. So welcome aboard, Usher. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Next is Nkechi Obi. She is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Premium Sports Management. She's got over 30 years experience and accomplishment in sports management, marketing and administration through her company's Premium Sports Management Services and Sports Pro Nigeria. Nkechi has been primarily involved in the design and management of sports projects targeted at engaging the private sector as a preeminent partner in sports development in Nigeria. She's also the thematic lead for the Sports Industry Thematic Group, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, who is in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Youth, Sports and Development. So what Nkechi does essentially is to try and see how government, which we know for a long time controlled most of the sports on the African continent, and bring in the private sector as well to form a blend that can move sports forward on the continent. There's a lot of work to be done, and Nkechi is one of those people at the forefront of doing that work. Nkechi, thank you very much for joining us here on the panel today.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Next is Amadou Fall. Many of you will know him as the leading basketball figure here in Africa. He's the Basketball Africa League president. In his previous role as the NBA vice president and managing director for Africa, he oversaw the significant growth in the NBA's business and basketball development efforts in Africa. And that was highlighted by 3 sold-out events, NBA Africa Games in Johannesburg and in Pretoria. There were 2 of them in Johannesburg and 1 of them in Pretoria. So in other words, Amadou is Mr. Basketball here in Africa. He's the one that has essentially brought what the NBA does in some countries around the world. I know they do that in China. They do that in London here sometimes, bringing NBA games to be played in different parts of the world. And Amadou Fall is the man who took those games to Africa. Amadou, thank you very much for agreeing to being on the panel.
Great to be here.
Okay. Now, should I be calling him a super agent? Misha Sher is the Global Vice President at MediaCom Sport Entertainment, an award-winning sport and entertainment marketing division of MediaCom. It's part of the WPP group. He's been at the forefront of the sports industry for more than 15 years and has negotiated and advised more than £1 billion in sponsorship investments with major sports and entertainment properties, including UEFA, the International Olympic Committee, the NFL, the National Football League in the States, Formula One, and others in more than 25 countries. He's also a former professional footballer. He began his business career in banking with Brown Brothers Harriman before returning to sport as an executive. He's also a published author, but I like to refer to him in the way that I described him in my first sentence. He is a super agent. Misha, thanks for agreeing to be on this panel.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction that I wrote for you.
Thank you very much. All right, and then last but in no way the least, he's actually one of my favorite sporting figures, if you want to call him that, in the whole wide world. Not only for me, but for Arsenal lovers all over the world. He's Dr. Kelechi Anyikude. He's Africa's biggest sports blogger, a cultural ambassador, an influencer, and an avid Arsenal fan. I mean, if you've ever seen a 2-second clip of Arsenal Fan TV, Dr. Kelechi, as he's known, will definitely be there with his horsewhip and his native Igbo hat. He's what many people don't know, though. He's a PhD holder in environmental engineering from the University of Leeds here in the UK. He's worked with such brands as Coca-Cola UK, Budweiser UK, Terence Higgins Trust, Union Bank of Nigeria, Snapchat, and DSTV. He's also the recipient of numerous awards, including the prestigious African Achievers Awards. Kelechi, thank you very much for joining us here on this panel.
Africa, it is well with you people.
Thank you
Big
very
up everybody.
It is well
Big
with
up
you
everybody.
too.
Yes,
It is well with you too.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, like, as Nkiru said, I mean, this is going to be very conversational. So please feel free to jump in as we move along. I'm going to start with you, Nkechi.
Wow.
With COVID-19, the pandemic today, where exactly is African sport?
Sorry? There's an echo. Where is? Okay.
I beg your pardon. Where is African sports today vis-a-vis the pandemic?
Like everybody else, we've ground to a halt. The minute we decided that we all needed to stay home and shelter in place, it was clear nothing was going to happen. For us here in Nigeria, we're in the process of actually bringing out the protocols to resume sport, non-contact sport. So sport like badminton, like tennis, they're actually rolling out some protocols. I'm aware of that from the ministry. Some of the federations have taken the initiative and are actually putting their own protocols together. But we ground to a real halt. You couldn't have fitness and recreation. You couldn't have competitive sport. In Nigeria, the National Sports Festival was not canceled, postponed, and all efforts to try to enable us to play, to have that festival, which is the #1 local multi-sport event in Nigeria. Efforts are ongoing, but it's each day the date keeps getting pushed forward, October, November, because we're all waiting on the committee, the COVID-19 committee, to give the go-ahead. So we're at a standstill, but in terms of physically playing sport, but in terms of actually doing some of those things that we need to do so that when we resume, we would get, hit the ground running, a lot has been done. And on our part here, and I'm speaking for us here because for a while, we've been trying to put a national sports policy in place. And over the past 4 years, efforts have been geared towards engaging with different stakeholders, different sports participants across the whole value chain, and see if we could structure something different from the usual sport as a participatory endeavor and move it to sport as business, so that we could do the back end. As I was saying before we started I was talking to Amadou, we could do the back end of sport, which we haven't done. That is get the business, the value chain going, get the ecosystem going, so we can have a more organized and structured manner of developing athletes from raw material to finished product. So we were able to spend these 4 months, beginning from about April till a couple of weeks ago, in putting a national sports industry policy into place, a draft. And for the very first time, that draft has been given to exposed to the general public, and reviews have come in. The review session for general public ended today, in fact. So we spent that time trying to reposition sports so that when they finally give us the go-ahead to start playing sport, we would be playing it from a different perspective.
That's very interesting that you say that. And I will come back to you. And that's something I also want to discuss with Amadou, because when you mention working on the back end, using this period to work on the back end for the resumption of sport. And I know that's one thing that the NBA has done successfully in America now, you know, playing in a secure bubble in Orlando, in Florida. And Amadou, you might be able to shed some light on that. So I'll come to you in a moment. But first, let me go to Usher. Usher, just you cover sports events all over the world, almost 2 or 3, 4 times a year. I dare say that this year you haven't been to cover any major sporting event. How damaging has this pandemic been to sports on the continent?
Well, obviously, 2020 was cut out to be a very exciting year, and I'll speak from a basketball perspective before Amadou comes in to speak about the Basketball Africa League, which we were so excited because from a sports enthusiast point of view, this league was definitely going to change the trajectory of basketball on the continent, because if you have the NBA, coming to literally be involved in a league outside of North America for the very first time, it shows that that there's future. Amadou has done a lot of work, Masai Ujiri, a lot of work in investing in African basketball, and this was really the moment. And the fact that they got the best teams on the continent, and also that it was going to go and move in sort of a caravan, imagine you have games in Rabat, you have games in Monastir, in Cairo, and all of them are on television, which has been a very big problem for African basketball. So those partnerships with the broadcasters and an opportunity, for example, to play in Kigali for the Final Four, and the final was going to be something so big for basketball, and we've missed out on that. And also from a football point of view, building on the momentum that the Africa Cup of Nations had last year in Cairo, in Egypt, and having teams prepared to start playing the World Cup qualifiers, and building on what happened in Russia, which was a disaster for most African teams. So this was really an opportunity for teams to play top tier friendly games, especially when you have African players playing very well in the English Premier League. Before we started, there was banter about those who were Liverpool fans, having players like Mo Salah, Sadio Mane, Naby Keita playing at that level, and having the whole world literally at their feet. We're missing that out on their form. And then obviously the Olympics, most of Africa's top tier athletes were going into the Olympics at a very high level. You saw Eliud Kipchoge from Kenya running under 2 hours in a marathon. Yeah, obviously it was not recognized by the World Athletics, but that's a huge step. And even from Uganda, tonight we have Joshua Cheptegei, who's going to run at the Monaco Diamond League and try to set a new record for the 5,000 meters, a record that has been in existence for 16 years, set by Kenenisa Bekele. So having these athletes now having to wait for another year before they can go to the Olympics when they were on top form, it's a disaster for the athletes, on the African continent.
And Amadou, Nkechi mentioned, working on that back end. Like I mentioned earlier, we've seen the NBA, they've been able to carry on with the playoffs, playing in a bubble atmosphere in Orlando. Has Africa lost out on that Africa Basketball League, or have you guys been working on how you can make sure that it commences once COVID-19 goes down?
Sorry, guys. Thank you, Peter, and it's great to be here and great to see you all. Usher, met Usher in 2012, I think, my first trip to Kigali. It's great to see her ascending into the sporting industry. And look, we obviously, when we decided to postpone the launch of the Basketball Africa League that was slated for March 13 in Dakar, we were disappointed at the time, but at the same time, we knew that that was the right decisions, right? And it was just a postponement. And I'm excited to let everyone here know that we are working feverishly to launch the league before the end of this calendar year. We will be announcing some more details very soon. Our teams are excited. We haven't really, sat on our hands. What we've been doing is we've launched our social media platforms. There is a series that's going on bi-monthly with the BAL Hang Time, where we invite personalities in the basketball landscape in the NBA or from across the world to engage with our fans. And also we are hosting a leadership series with our BAL team, all 12 of them, because the main purpose of the Basketball Africa League is to build the entire basketball ecosystem. It was great to hear Nkechi talk about the national sports policy in Nigeria that I hope that most countries are going to follow, because it's about time that we look to figure out how to build value right here on the continent instead of just relying on exporting our talent. The talent is always going to be exported because we have so much of it that the best athletes around the world, the best leagues around the world are going to want to come and recruit talent from Africa. But what the Basketball Africa League is going to do is to showcase African talent. This is a league that unapologetically is going to be powered by Africans. It's made to showcase African talent, not only on the court, but we are great to see people like Usher that are going to be selling this product, that are going to be talking about basketball on the continent. There will be agents who will be, coming out and starting to manage players. It's about really leveraging the power of the NBA brand, and we are in partnership with Fiba here to build a product that we are all going to be proud of, and fans from across Africa of all ages are going to be able to enjoy. The biggest element here, and just echoing what Usher was talking about, the way we are setting up and launching the league in Caravan, it is going to showcase African cities, African culture, African fashion, the art, the culinary art from different countries. And this is why we look at basketball and sports, in this case, the Basketball Africa League, as an economic growth engine, because it's going to promote inter-Africa trade, grow tourism. Obviously right now with COVID, with limited travel, but we are building for the long run. So we're very excited, and we're looking forward to announcing the new development and the new scenarios we're looking at before the end of the year.
That's great to hear, and please do let us know immediately, because it's something that we've been telling our own viewers on for quite a while, and people have been asking us that question. But whether we like it or not, we talk about how much sponsorship money sports has lost, even on the continent, outside the continent, how much how some players in some sports have had to take pay cuts due to the COVID pandemic. But I think we would all agree that the people that have suffered the most from the pandemic, from the stoppage in sporting events across the world, have to be the fans. Dr. Kelechi, how has this affected fans? We'll start from the Arsenal perspective. I know you're a big Arsenal fan, a season ticket holder, but we'll also talk about, for instance, Super Eagles would have been playing qualifying games. I know you go to watch some of their games. How has this stoppage affected you, the fans?
Well, it's been very frustrating not to be in the stadium to cheer our players and to support the boys. The Liverpool fans will tell you that it was frustrating for them not to witness the trophy lift. But it is what it is. We are getting used to it. We now have to watch from home or watch virtually. The clubs now have Zoom-like stuff that they get some of the fans, and then they show their faces in the stadium as well. And some of us, we just gather ourselves in a socially distanced place to watch it. But it's not the same. It's not the same. That feeling of your player scoring a goal, like you're hugging your next neighbor and all that, is no longer there. So, but it is what it is. We have to stay safe. Hopefully this window will pass and then we'll come back to the stadium, but definitely it's not the same.
Indeed, I watched videos of you guys watching, AFTV crew watching the FA Cup final together, as you said, in a socially distanced place, but it's not like the stadium. Misha, let me just turn to you now. You handle the financial side of sports, and Africa is in a very precarious situation sports-wise. I mean, globally, we're not even anywhere near the top. But with this pandemic now, it must have hit us really bad. Have you got a projection just to give us an idea of how much this pandemic could have cost us in dollar-wise in African sports?
That's a good question. Look, it would be a significant loss. It's depending on when depending on when you're when you're looking at this at the situation. The numbers are the numbers are quite bad either way. I've not seen any estimates that are quite positive. I mean, the entire industry has taken a hit, and so there's no one that's been, unfortunately, that's been able to avoid this. I think that what's happening is that those organizations at the very top are going to have perhaps an easier time in emerging, because they, as things start to come back, they they're the ones who can deliver value quicker, for broadcasters, for sponsors, and other types, other stakeholders, where where you're able to generate revenue. If you don't have a similar type of infrastructure, which in many cases unfortunately is the case in Africa, that journey becomes harder. It's more difficult. But as we just talked about a couple of minutes ago, what's important is to use this time and to really look at what can be enhanced, what can be improved, how can you make the most of this opportunity to really address some fundamental, some structural, I would say issues, but some of the structural components that you have in sport in Africa, to make sure that as we begin to return, that there is a really strong infrastructure in place on which to build. So to answer your question, I don't have a number for what this is going to cost Africa. So I'm sorry, I'm sorry for that, but I think it's going to impact Africa perhaps worse than some of the more developed developed continents like North America or Europe.
And I do apologize for putting you on the spot there. I mean, it's not something that you can actually just pluck a number up. But I want to stay with you, Misha, because I'm going to play devil's advocate now, because we know that sports on the continent is hardly profitable. So if you're not playing in a league in South Africa or in Egypt, perhaps, those are probably the only two football leagues on the continent that have fans streaming into the stadiums every single weekend to watch the matches. Elsewhere, apart from major events, it's really patchy. And we do know that, in a lot of these areas that we're all talking about now, where Africa has to try and gird itself and start restructuring, we have been lagging behind for decades. How possible is it that within the last 6 months, would have got, excuse the pun, our game right?
Say again, how possible is it what?
To imagine that within the last 6 months of the pandemic and all the lockdowns, that Africa is now finally getting its act right.
Yeah, look, I think sometimes it's unfortunate, but sometimes circumstances force us to act. And Africa is not really, it's not unique in that regard. There are many businesses. Our business, we're having to take a step back and say, we've operated a certain way for the last 7-8 years, but what does the industry need? How is the world evolved in the last 6 months, and where do we sit in that world? So I think, if I was in one of the things I love about your continent is this incredible sense of optimism, where oftentimes the circumstances are quite challenging. And I think you're right. You have professional leagues, probably just only in South Africa and Egypt, where where it's perhaps profitable, but you know, in other places, huge opportunities. I mean, you've got places like Nigeria and Kenya and other markets where you have incredible amount of talent, sports talent. So what's missing? I think what's missing is again, that's the type of professional structure, the combination of sort of private and public sector that allows an industry to grow. Because you can, if you can create a football team in Kansas City in America where they don't really, where they've never played football or soccer, if you call it, and they're filling out stadiums, I ask myself, how does that happen? How is it that all of a sudden you're selling out of your tickets and you've got a waiting list and people can't wait to go? Well, because when you create the right type of environment, when you have a stadium, when you understand what people want in terms of, I won't say a product, but in terms of an experience, when you can create that, you will attract commercial partners, you will attract broadcasters, you will attract fans. People will want to be part of that. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be competing with the Premier League. I think that's what sometimes when I look across the world, and I think for me, America is interesting because they don't have a culture playing football, playing soccer, even following soccer, and yet in a short space of time, they've created that in many different parts of the country. And I ask myself, how does that happen? How is it that all of a sudden people are going? Because the quality isn't that great. If you go to Africa, you can go to many places. The quality of football will be 10 times better. So, to me, you're sitting on the gold mine. There's an enormous opportunity if you're able. If you could start to develop the infrastructure in these other places, the potential is immense.
Nkechi, I mean, I really love what Misha has just said there.
So do I.
Yeah, because sports, whether we like it or not, sports is a product. Sports is a product. I mean, like he rightly said now, why should I go and watch Kansas City football team when I have maybe Lobby Stars in Nigeria where the quality will definitely be better, but it's a product that is being sold to the people, and that's just where we're lagging behind on the continent.
So Misha has given us this example. Kansas is in the middle of nowhere, and people are flocking to the stadium. And Amadou himself has given us the example of what the NBA is doing. If we don't build the back end, what I call input, is an input-output thing. So our output is poor now because the input isn't there. So we've got one part of the input, which is the skills, the talent. But the skills and the talent will only get us this far. And so the skills and the talent have gotten us as far as it will get us. Anything else from this point has to be about the whole product. So is the stadiums, is the facilities. Can I get into the stadium? Will I be seated properly? Will I get refreshments? Will I have the look and feel that would encourage somebody else to come? So you need the facilities, you need the ambience, you need everything. Then apart from that, you also need to make it attractive for TV so that over and beyond the maybe max 40, 50, 60,000 people that you can get into a stadium, you can actually reach another 600, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people. And you can only reach them if the product you're selling, it looks good enough for them to sit down in front of a TV and say, I like this. So we've not done that part. We've not done the part of ensuring that you can have a pipeline of raw talent to finished product. We've not put infrastructure in place. We've not put governance, corporate governance in place. We've not enabled the private sector to see the business side of what is essentially a social and community development platform. When all is said and done, sport really performs more of social and community engagement.
But then, Nkechi, sorry, if I may just jump in. If I may just jump in. I mean,
sure.
That has always been the case, hasn't it? on the African
Yes.
continent. So my
Yes.
question, I think, my worry is is the fact that if we haven't been able to get it together, in the past, 17 African countries turned 60 this year. If you've not been able to get it together in that time, what makes us think that in the last 6 months, we've been putting things in place, to try and build that back end that we've been talking about?
But it's
Because
not the last
what we're
6
looking
months.
at, what we're looking at now is what happens post coronavirus.
Yes, but it's not the last 6 months. It's just that this COVID period enabled you to have a period where there are no distractions. We would have had the Olympics. We would have focused on getting athletes to the Olympics. We would have been distracted by preparation, participation, budget, this. Now we didn't have that. So over the past 5 years, a lot of work engagements have been coming along. And so everything just came together, and you got a group of 60 people who could work and now take all material, all research, everything that had happened in Forest and say, here's what it is. We've had our pyramid right side up, where the market was at the base, and we were trying to use a pump to get the money to flow upwards. What if we flipped our pyramid the other way and the apex was now down, and gravity will help us to do the rest? So focus not on the output, but on the input. And the input requires a market at base level, which is where, so if you flip the pyramid, then you will think of sports as a business. But if you leave the pyramid the way it is, then you'll be concentrating on 1 million elite athletes there who are not going to give you anything. The market is actually the base. So we finally found a minister who understood that sport needed to be a business. He partnered with the foremost think tank, economic think tank, the Economic Summit Group, and in 10 months, less than 10 months, we had this document. Now, if you go through the document, the focus is on sports development and sports for development. There are two things intertwined. The sports for development is the business, and it will enable you to create the brands that will support your sports development program. So Africa needs, funny enough, the African Union has had this model. They've got a draft policy framework for countries to utilize to develop their sports policies. They've got the Antananarivo recommendations arising from the African Union 2063, the Africa We Want document. It was all right there. The thing was, who was going to take the time and the trouble to put these things together and give the private sector a reason to support what you're doing? Because they can see the business.
Let me just hold you there, because somebody who is at the forefront, obviously, of trying to bring these ideas to the continent is Amadou. Amadou, yes. I mean, whatever you're doing across Africa, you must deal with governments and you must deal with private sector. So in your dealings with these two different sectors, have you noticed a change in them? Have you noticed a willingness to listen to experts like yourself and begin to do things differently?
You know, Peter, when we first opened our office in 2010, we were already building on 10 years of activities at grassroots level. We launched the first Basketball Without Borders camp in Johannesburg in 2003, where we brought 100 young players, 18 years and younger, from over 35 countries. We understood that we had to start from grassroots. Obviously, what we saw every year gave us the impetus and encouragement, really, to decide to open an office in 2010 as part of the NBA's global expansion. We have offices all over the world. We know that there was an unbelievable opportunity in Africa to grow our sport and ultimately grow the NBA business. But, we didn't come in 2010 and say, let's start a professional league. We wanted to first focus on accessibility, increasing participation in our sport. There is, boys and girls from across this continent who are passionate about basketball. It was about giving them an opportunity to participate in the sport. And then we spent a lot of time engaging with stakeholders, from sports ministries to federations to NGOs, everybody active in basketball, to figure out a way to collectively work together to elevate the profile of our sport. So we form partnerships in different countries where we build courts, we train coaches, we seek people like Usher even, like to encourage them to continue on that path in terms of seeing that, sport is not just for the athletes who play on the court and the coaches who coach the game, right? There's all kinds of other functions that we need to have. So we spent a decade from 2010 to now really energizing the market, encouraging the growth of the ecosystem from different standpoints. We know that you got to get governments buy-in, whether it's in Nigeria or Senegal or Kenya or in South Africa. We've met with all the sports ministers, even in those early days. And Nkechi, actually, I was extremely glad to have dinner with the minister. This was in January, actually. I just saw, really a different mindset, somebody who understands that sports can be bigger than just recreation. And really, I think for the African countries, you got to look at it as an important activity that could contribute greatly to GDPs, create jobs and infrastructure. You see infrastructure starting to emerge across the continent. We did our part, whether it's, really working very hard to forge a relationship with President Kagame, who we know is a sports fan, an incredible leader on the continent. You see now Kigali Arena, 10,000 seats. This is the site that was going to be the site of our Basketball Africa League Final Four. And Dakar Arena in Dakar, 15,000 seats, where I was there the last final of the women's Afro-Basket, 20,000 people in the arena with 5,000 outside. So there is interest and passion in the sport. But as Nkechi was talking about, you have to make it attractive. And that's our focus. Everything she's talking about, that's what we are doing with the Basketball Africa League. That's what we are focusing on.
A lot of work. I'm thinking back now to the 80s and the 90s. A lot of work was done in football because of the amazing amount of talent, footballing talent that we had on the African continent. That still hasn't worked. Do you think maybe basketball stands a better chance because it is a excuse me for saying it, a smaller sport on the continent? It is easier to deal with. You're dealing with maybe 20 staff overall, including players, whereas in football, you're talking about 50, 60 people. Is it easier to start off with basketball, or could basketball be the trick that changes things, the way people look at sports on the continent?
Look, we are consistent as a league, the NBA, in our approach to build our product and to build consistency in how we grow the game on a global basis with our world-class, best-in-class practices, right? That's the approach we had here on the continent. I don't think it's a matter of numbers in terms of small or whatever. We are in the United States, right? American football is probably the most popular sport, in America. Baseball, all those sports also, have the same access in terms of, or even they may have more resources, but there's something about how we do things. You look at our athletes, not only they are global icon in terms of being the best athletes in the world, but they are interested in really building themselves beyond just what's happening on the court. What's happening in the US currently, with our athletes being in the middle of the whole social justice conversation. That's the same way they approach the involvement in their communities. We have our NBA players from Africa coming back every summer, getting involved in grassroots activities, building hospitals in the case of Dikembe Mutombo. This is beyond basketball. Bismarck Biombo investing in education, building schools. Gorgi Jang investing in agriculture to create jobs in his environment. I think I have no doubt that at the pace we are going And again, we just didn't wake up and say, let's start a pro league. We've been working here for decades, even before the establishment of the NBA Africa office in 2010, and all the great athletes, Hakeem, Ikembe, Manud, that were pioneers. We are building on that momentum to now start a professional league. When I talk about these leadership series that we are doing with our BAL team, we are looking to professionalize these teams, to give them tools to run their organizations as professional organizations. Someday they will have their own arenas. They will know how to market their team, how they're going to sell tickets to fill their arenas. And somebody said it earlier, we are going to create an incredibly compelling product that broadcasters are going to want to put in television for fans to view across Africa and around the world. So I have no doubt that, basketball is a sport of the future. We're not on a race with any other sport. We do what we do in the way we do it. And, I'm excited about really launching the Basketball Africa League before the end of this year for our fans to enjoy and be part of it.
And Usher, let me come to you. I've just seen I've just seen someone's comment or flash up on the screen now that maybe the problem with our sports on the continent is that we're trying to copy be it an American or European or an Asian model when we should be developing our own models. I mean, if you look to a place like Dakar in Senegal, in Gambia, part of Nigeria, where they have their localized form of wrestling, and the matches are so well attended. Should we be looking at different ways of doing things, Usher?
Well, I was itching, from the time Misha talked about Kansas and the way that they attract fans to the stadium. Last year, I was very honored to be invited by the US State Department on an international visitor leadership program to go to the US and see how Americans treat sports. And really, it was about also learning how to use media to cover women in sport. So we ended up in Kansas and actually we watched a game of the Kansas City Mavericks, which is a second tier ice hockey team. And guess what? We got to the stadium and we're talking about maybe 20,000 fans, and from the minute you arrive, as a fan, you're involved, you're engaged. By the time you leave, you want to come back the next time. And these are things that we're not doing on the African continent largely. I'm not saying there's no one not doing them, but as football, as basketball, as cycling, we have to, I insist, we really have to borrow from what the Americans or what the Europeans are doing, and then we customize on our continent. I'll explain why. When you look at Africa, the most followed team or club is Al Ahly in Egypt. We're talking about a country that has about 120 million people. And Al Ahly literally suffers from allowing fans to be official members of the club. So you have about 60,000 and the club is saying, look, we can't go past this, but there's another whole millions of fans that want to be members of the club. And so it's really about attaching emotions to the fans. For example, if you look at the Premier League, look at the clubs in London. So you're either supporting Tottenham, Arsenal, or Chelsea, or if it's Manchester, you're either into City or into United. So it's a city thing. Before you identify with the entire world, it has to be about the city. So are our clubs in Africa doing those things? And that's why I'm really interested in the Basketball Africa League, which I think, for example, if we have a team from Cairo that is Zamalek, so all the fans of Zamalek are going to, of course, support that team. And all the Al Ahly fans will support the rivals of Zamalek in that game. So then already you have the stadium that is filled just because you're talking about emotions. And it's the same thing that is happening in Tanzania, for example. If you watch the Dar es Salaam Derby, Yanga and Simba, look, when they're playing, we're talking about 80,000 people, 20,000 on the outside and 60,000 on the inside. During this pandemic, about 3 weeks ago, 30,000 fans in the stadium, social distancing, but they're in the stadium. So really it's about emotions, and we have to ride on that and have an identity. What is the identity of the African teams? You know, because you're talking about emotion, you're talking about Kelechi, who is a big time Arsenal fan. Why? Because he associates himself with the Arsenal brand. So can we do the same for the clubs on the African continent? So the thing is, yes, we can go to the traditional sports. We have so many of them in our different countries, but even if we stay mainstream, you know, basketball, football, cycling, we have to talk about the emotional part. We have to identify something with the club. For example, in Kampala, in the Uganda Premier League, we have about 16 teams, but maybe 12 of them are all based in Kampala. So they're fighting for the same number of fans. They don't have an identity that, you know, attracts the fans. And it's just like that. You know, when you look at the other teams, just to conclude, you have, for example, Mamelodi Sundowns. It's very easy for me as a Ugandan to identify with Mamelodi Sundowns because a Ugandan is the #1 choice goalkeeper there. So I'm watching all their games on SuperSport, you know. But if, for example, a Guinean player is playing for maybe Liverpool, you know, maybe I'll say, you know what, I'll support Liverpool because there's an African player playing there. So we need an identity to help us sell sport on this continent.
You know, that is a very interesting point that you make, Usher. Kelechi, I know that you became a big time Arsenal fan about 10 years ago. I think I listened to one of your video casts. You became a big time supporter of Arsenal about 10 years ago. First of all, before you became an Arsenal fan, were you supporting any team in Nigeria?
Yes, make that 20-25 years actually. You understand?
Okay.
Yeah,
I support Nigeria.
Yeah, Iwanyao National, they're known as Heartland FC. Yeah, because I was born in Owerri, and anytime I go back, I go there to watch them. But again,
but then it just takes it back to what Usher was saying. Why isn't your passion for Iwanyao National as visible as your passion for Arsenal?
Yeah, again, it's about the branding and about the safety and about the trust in the league. You know, you look at the Nigerian league, I'm not trying to diss them, but there was a time it came out and no team won an away game. And you're asking yourself, how is that possible? And my colleague here was...
That's a Nigerian league for you.
Yeah,
a few years
exactly.
ago when no team won an away game, yeah.
Do you understand? And like what she said, she was talking about emotions as well. Out there, you see dangerous emotion. So they can never lose. If they lose, they beat the referee or damage the opponent's boss. And you don't want to see all that kind of thing. You don't want to be really associated with such a dangerous brand, if you get what I'm saying. But you still support the team. You still check out their results and all that, you know. But like what she was saying, I agree with her totally. I used to live in Leeds. Leeds is like my second team in England. I used to work there as a steward when I came to England. So I used to look out for their results and, you know, low-key support them. But again, it's structured, the branding is right. So I think like they are doing in Rwanda. I think Rwanda is probably they have the facility, so everything can come in. We need an act of parliament, an act of government to develop these sporting facilities. And most importantly for football, just like we do here in England, no games are shown at 3:00. Everybody goes to the stadium. So if you bring that kind of thing, I say no games at 3:00 on GSC, people go and watch, probably at least some people will go and watch Iwanyao or 3SC at the Dabasingba Stadium. You know, you will kind of open up your league like that. That's how they did it in England, and that's how they are successful as well. So we need an act of parliament, in my opinion, to get people to the stadiums in a way. But again, before people can go in there, it needs to be safe and the infrastructure needs to be on point.
Very interesting. Unfortunately,
I'm sorry, Peter. Peter, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have to say something. And it's about leadership. I'm sorry for the Nigerians here. I apologize. But there was a huge issue two years ago when Nigeria had, I should say, the best jersey at the FIFA World Cup. And the NFF, the Nigeria Football Federation, literally did not make maybe any cent from the sale of those jerseys from Nike. So you ask yourself, for example, who signed that deal?
Exactly.
You know, how can you sign a deal where the federation is not earning from it? You have 3 million people making orders, literally lining up in London, waiting to buy this amazing jersey, and the federation and the people of Nigeria and not benefiting from that. So these are some of the things that we really need to be serious. And Kelechi, you talk about you supporting Arsenal, but you know that it was very strategic for Arsene Wenger to sign Nigerian players.
Exactly, yeah.
Black players as well, so that Arsenal can get very big mileage from the African continent. And that's very important.
Very right.
Okay. Lots of comments coming in here. We're really running out of time, but I want us to just, all of us, maybe take 2 minutes, please, just to tell us what your, not exactly a prediction, but if you think that, post-COVID-19, we're still in it, but are we moving in the right direction? Are we doing enough to try as much as possible to maximize whatever gains we can do, money-wise, developmental-wise, emotionally, when it comes to sports on the African continent? Kelechi, since I have you on the screen, let me start with you.
I don't know. I don't know, because the way I look at it, I always look at it, let's say, from Nigeria's perspective. We're still borrowing money. Today we are borrowing from China. Tomorrow, next thing you hear, NDDC money is missing. So how do you want to develop this sport? How do I have confidence, when somebody is fainting in parliament and all that stuff? And then you're thinking, so where's this money going to? It's not even trickling to the grassroots. So where are you going to develop from? Where are you going to start from? That's my only problem. So I don't even know. But with COVID now, I think we can save some money that we have, from, so you have, when some football administrators travel, they carry a whole family and entourage. Now everybody has to do video and virtual meetings now. So maybe we'll be able to save some money and invest it in our sports. So hopefully from there, things will start getting better. And, if we get our branding and everything right, things will get better.
Misha, do you think it's a surmountable problem that we have on the continent? Do you think we're moving in the right direction?
I'll be perfectly honest. It's hard for me, it's probably not really appropriate for me to say. I mean, you guys are on the continent. I'm not close enough to it sort of day to day, particularly over the last sort of 6 months, to see whether the right kind of steps are being taken. But what I would say, just to follow up on what Usher and what some of the others were saying, I think this is that, now is a great opportunity. We're forced to sort of take a step back, to really reflect on what's important, to really kind of reconfigure where we are and where we want to be. And I think, the beauty of where, in a way, the positive thing about where we are, if there's a positive thing, is that we don't actually have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of the things that we aspire to, a lot of the things that you want to do, they already exist in some form. We talked about whether this US or Europe or other parts of the world, you can look to those things, adapt them to your, to your local nuance to make sure that it works. And at the end of the day, I didn't have a chance to say it earlier, but it is about, it's about creating something that's compelling, compelling product. As someone who's been in marketing for so many years, I look at companies like Nike and Apple and Disney and you realize that what they do so successfully and what you can learn from them is that they understand how to create something that people want. It's not about necessarily the actual, Apple doesn't sell computers really, or phones, and Nike are not really into selling sneakers. It's a byproduct of what they do, but they give you, they create that kind of fandom. They create something that people want to be associated with. And I think if you take that mindset to wherever you are and you ask yourself, how do we apply that locally? How do we create something that people want to be a part of, that they want to spend money with, that they want to spend time with? Then we can find more parallels. I think that we perhaps, that we perhaps think exists. So I hope that's what's taking place now. And I'm looking forward to, we're starting to do quite a bit of work in Africa. I'm looking forward to spending more time on the continent and seeing how we can share some of the best practices and help you on that journey.
Thank you very much, Misha. And I just want to say to all the viewers. I know there are quite a lot of them now who have joined us online, and so many people want questions. Now is the time to start sending your questions in as I take some of these thoughts from our guests. And if you've got any question you want to direct it to anybody in particular, please just let us know who your question is being directed to. I know there are quite a few that have come in already, but I want to go to Amadou. Amadou, are we on the right track in the African continent for us to be able to say that, yes, we have got a compelling product that we're giving not only to the African continent, but we're asking the world to come and partake with us?
I can tell you from our standpoint that we are even more bullish about the opportunity we see in Africa. You know, and just one thing that COVID has taught us is that sport is an important part of our societal fabric. You know, it's been missed. It brings people together, and I think it also, you know, shortened all the time we spend, you know, dealing with worrying about COVID. And when I see that out of this hiatus, that from Nkechi's report, this national sports policy being born and discussed and drafted at the highest level. I mean, these are signs that give me, you know, not, I don't want to talk about hope, because we are actually actioning on our plans, you know, and also talking about the emotion that Usher talked about earlier. Even the way we build our rosters with our teams in the Basketball Africa League, we encourage African talent to be prioritized, right? 8 players of each team have to be from the country where the club is from. And then 2 other players have to be from another African country. And then we have 2 players that could come from anywhere else in the world. And we see other countries, like even in Nigeria, talking about building world-class arenas. We have conversation with a lot of big players there. And in DRC, the same thing, in Tanzania, in Kenya. So we see a movement. This thing is coming, you know, and I think, you know, and we localize our initiatives, and it's not like we're copying and pasting anything that we've learned, you know, from the NBA, but we are coming and adapting our best practices, using the incredible amount of talent that's on this continent that doesn't exist anywhere else. Our league, the Basketball Africa League, in the next 10 years is going to be one of the absolute best professional basketball league in the country, in the world, not just because of the quality of the athletes that are playing in it, but there's demand, there's hunger, there's a growing middle class in Africa that want to be entertained. We're going to commingle with all the Afrobeat, you know, cool artists, the best designers on our continent, the stuff that the rest of the world admire and crave about African culture is going to be all around, wrapped around our league. So I am very bullish. I'm encouraged. Yes, there's a lot of work to be done still, but you know, we've started the work, you know, more than 10 years ago. So encouraging.
Of course, as you've rightfully put it there, you know, you've described the importance of sport, and I remember even here in the UK, I mean, without the arenas even being opened, once the Premier League restarted and we could watch it on TV, there was just almost a sense of relief here in the UK to say, oh, actually, at some point, life can get back to normal. Usher, you always, you know, you're almost kind of like a go-between between the sports administrators, the sports players, and the fans, and you have your pulse on a lot of these things. How important is it for Africa to get sports right in order to elevate its place in the world? So we're basically talking about soft power, and we know that one of the most powerful kind of soft powers is sports. How possible will it be for Africa to be able to develop its own brand and find its own place in the world? Usher.
First of all, we have to be very strategic and intentional about some of these things. And like Amadou spoke earlier, you know, there has to be a plan and then to follow through with the plan. I was very privileged to live in Rwanda for 3 years. And so I know how this small East African country is punching above its weight using sports. You know, if you look at the construction of the Kigali Arena that Amadou talked about, we're talking about a 10,000-seater stadium, you know, for basketball. I know so many friends who traveled from Uganda, from Kenya, Tanzania, from around the East African region last December that went to watch the Basketball Africa League qualifiers. And they were so excited. They were like, this is what we see on the television when we watch the NBA. And here we are in Kigali looking at this. And you have a country that, you know, has an airline. And so when they say, look, we're going to host the Afrobasket, you know, Rwanda is going to host the Fiba Afrobasket next year. The whole of Africa is going to fly to Kigali and watch these, you know, NBA players, superstars. I'm sure Nigeria is going to bring all their firepower to do this. So Rwanda is an example of that. You can talk about South Africa and rugby. When Sia Kolisi, you know, I don't care if you're black, brown, green, blue, looking at Sia Kolisi lift that World Cup, the Webb Ellis, you know, winning the Rugby World Cup, you know, lifting it up. Historic, amazing story, you know, and it tells, you know, you see his father flying out of South Africa for the very first time in his life, and he watched his son lift a World Cup trophy. Absolutely fantastic, you know. So these are some of the stories that sport is trying to use, and you can also look at an example like Morocco. We know that for a long time Morocco had very many issues with the African Union, and now in the last 3 years Morocco is trying to come back and show that, look, we are African, you know, and they're using sports in very many ways. They have projects that they're running in football, building synthetic stadiums across the African continent. In Rwanda alone, they have a partnership to build 30 small stadiums for football. And this is how they're using sports to sort of say that, look, we love Africa, we're in Africa, we could be just 14 kilometers from Spain, but we're still African, you know? So you have countries like Morocco, you have countries like Rwanda, South Africa, and so many of them that are using sports to communicate and to say that we are here. Look, you have Rwanda that just signed two partnerships with PSG and Arsenal to visit Rwanda on the sleeve, you know, amazing partnership. So every time you're watching Arsenal play, you're seeing visit Rwanda and you're thinking, what is Rwanda about? So now Rwanda is no longer referred to as the country that 26 years ago and had, you know, the genocide, you know, against the Tutsis, but you have a country that is now looked at as a sports powerhouse, and they're using cycling, basketball, football to tell their own story and redefine how the world thinks about them. So yes, sports can be used.
Absolutely, and I've just seen a reminder on the screen. You know, I'm not quite sure how this didn't come into my mind earlier, because if you talk about soft power on the continent, I mean, if you look at the Nigerian movie industry, Nollywood, you know, the movies from Nollywood are watched all over the world. Everybody is now playing Afrobeats, which is an African sound. You know, Beyonce is doing it, Alicia Keys is doing it, Ed Sheeran is doing it. So, Nkechi, it means we can get it right, can't we?
Absolutely. Is this for anybody?
So, I was just talking to Nkechi very briefly. Amadou, I'll come back to you.
You said we can get it right.
Yeah.
No,
can't we?
We can get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
yeah.
I think we can. You know, when we started our conversation about 5 years ago, the first thing we said was we needed to take 100 naira every day from 60 million people. So what do we need to do? That we needed to build an ecosystem that depended on 60 million people spending 100 naira every day. Look, I tell people it's pure numbers. If I need to take 100 naira from you, what do I need to give you in return? So it's about goods and services, the quality of your goods and the quality of your services. So we started out from that premise, and work backwards, that we needed to treat sports as a consumer-driven mass retail item. Everybody has an emotional connection to sport. Oh, but the bottom line is that it's a retail business. It's about one customer after the other patronizing you for goods and services. That's all. That's the economy of sports. So we looked at who contributes the most to participation. And the biggest contributor is the education sector. So why don't we have facilities in schools? Why don't we have school children playing sport every day, and each one of them coming to school in shirts, shoes, balls, and boots, and bringing a ball? In Nigeria, there are 40 million children. So that's a 40 million target audience immediately. The second target audience is health sector. And we said, if we got the doctors to support us and encourage everybody to do sport, when you come to the hospital, you got a headache, before he writes you a prescription, says, well, as did you exercise? And I say, oh, 3 years ago, my friend, you've got to start something. That's another 30 million people into the market. So you've got yourself 70 million people willing to pay 100 naira every day to do that. So, but we didn't have that back end to support that. So if you told all those children to play sport, there were no facilities, there were no manufacturers, there was no content developer, there was nothing. So the thinking process is to go back to the foundation and say, here's how we're going to develop our sport from base to the next layer, semi-professional athletes, and to the next layer, the elite athletes, the professional. That's how it's going to grow. So if we don't do that, we're all messing around. And at the end of the day, the African Union does have a template. Now, I've been reading certain comments here about the fact that there is a disconnect between the African Union. There's always a disconnect, but you've got to find the connection. What happens is that we all sit in our homes and hope and pray some magic wand can be waved, and when we get to where we're going, it's not going to happen. What's going to happen is putting boots on the ground and putting backs to the grinding stone and looking at the work that has been done before, fine-tuning it, looking at what has been done in other countries, think global, bring it local. Look at your own conditions in your country, what works. I also am reading from people saying there is no money and what have you. And I looked at when the telecom companies came to Nigeria. People were saying nobody could afford to spend 50 naira a minute on phones. And today, within 6 months, they tore up all their projections and looked at a market. So the fact of the matter is there are 200 million people in here. I'm talking about Nigeria, and we can extrapolate. There are 1 billion people on this continent. African continent. We can find 250 million people who can spend $1 a day on fulfilling their passions. The thing is, what do we give them in return? Create an ecosystem. I'm more driven by the business side, the sports for development side, enabling the sports development side. Because without that happening, we won't get, we'll just keep running on the sport. So my contribution to this conversation is that we go back to first principles and create a market for goods and services by actually building the ecosystem, the value chain of the sports industry.
Thank you very much, Nkechi. I mean, we've got barely 15 minutes to go now. I know there's some questions. Obi, you were going to ask a question. I know I've kept you waiting for a while.
That's fine. That's fine. Great conversation, guys. I just wanted to ask, because I don't think no one's really talked about this, but what do we feel about, I mean, I grew up in England and sports in school was absolutely critical, not just for what it did for the community, but also for values. And I think that if we could get sports in schools correct, I think South Africa probably has it right. Kenya might have it right. I know Nigeria doesn't have it right. I can't speak for other countries, but what do we feel about sports in school and how important is it to build both for the society and to get into professional sports? That's my question.
Okay, Misha, do you want to take that question? I mean,
yes,
I know you're going to be looking at it globally now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, I think that's a great point, Obi. I think all of these, the things that we're talking about, this sport and participation and habits, many of them start, at a really, really young age. We get our kids, we get kids participating, being active, getting into the habit of, not just being active in terms of what is good for their health, but also in terms of what it does for their self-esteem and camaraderie and interaction, all the things that sports benefit in terms of, not necessarily at this point, I'm not even talking about raising professional athletes, but just developing more confident, more healthy, more active, human beings that go on and become part of our society. I mean, I can tell you from, I grew up originally in what was then Soviet Union, and then my family immigrated to the US. And clearly in the US, if there's a really strong focus on sports at schools, and particularly when it comes to girls. And I found it really eye-opening. I now have a young daughter, and I realized when I was in the US and I was coaching and I saw young girls, what it does for kids to be exposed to something and for that to become normal from the time that they start going to school. So in a really roundabout way, I think it's a really, really fundamental part of a healthy society.
And Nkechi just made a point now, with a little tongue-in-cheek note on the screen, saying, maybe African leaders. Sorry, was it Nkiru? Maybe African leaders should be made to play sports before they are elected, because actually they played sports when they were in school. I remember, just like Misha has mentioned now, we played sports in school. It was part of the school curriculum, and now it's no longer happening. But as people have been saying here, it's very critical. Amadou, if you would, sorry, have you got any words of advice for, those of us in Africa who want to try and build sports as a brand?
I think first you can't skip steps. We have to start with the basics. And I'm glad that we're talking about sports in school. If you go to Senegal and many other countries, people will tell you that in the heydays when sports was really working, because school was the hub. We are doing that. We're pushing our junior NBA leagues to get young people in school to interface with the sport because of the values that Peter talked about, Obi was talking about earlier, how we, inculcate the right characters in young people to teach them to become better citizens. And that's really was our approach to growing our game and the NBA brand in Africa, because we didn't, again, just come and look at the professional level. That pyramid that Kelechi talked about earlier, that's where we're focused. And I think school can play a very central role. And then you're filtering the talent before you can talk about the professional level. I think it's about really starting with the basics and encouraging the right leadership because you cannot do it without government, right? You have to make sure that government creates that enabling environment. But that's really their role. It's not about them investing money, dollars in the thing. It's about creating that enabling environment. And I can see in Nigeria, this national sports policy is a good place to start. And then they should build the infrastructure. Yes, doing it in school is a great place to start too, because it's multi-purpose for multi-usage. And then it has to be the private sector. How do you attract brands and corporations to come and invest? And in order to do that, you have to have a level of organization that is going to allow you to create the compelling product that we are all striving to have for the broadcasters to want to come and put the product, because content is very much in demand with the proliferation and in this digital age, right? I mean, you can make up your own television channel, but you need that content. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, where the game should be played? How do we start at basics to build methodically and really create the product that is going to be in demand?
Peter, I have something to
Usher,
say.
go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you, please. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I just wanted to share a model that Uganda is using at the moment. And actually, FIFA is consulting Uganda on how they're running secondary school competitions. It's very, very important for us in Uganda because it has even become commercialized in the sense that you have the top schools that want to excel at sports, literally doing a countrywide scouting program to get the best young players from maybe the age of 10 or 12 so that they can book them, so that when they're at the edge of going to secondary school, they sign them up and give them scholarships to study for free throughout their entire secondary school. And then it's also been very, very key for the growth of women's football in the last 5 years in Uganda. There's 8 teams in the top tier, and 5 of them are institutions. So you have secondary schools and you have the universities, 2 of them. So what they do is to encourage these young girls that even when their parents say, oh, girls cannot play football, they cannot play basketball or whatever, they have a situation where they say, oh no, we have a scholarship for your child, for your daughter. Is that something you're willing to forego just so that they don't play? So then, of course, the parents compromise a little bit, and you have a scenario where these girls have free education, and then when they're done, they're connected to colleges in the US, and then later on play professional football. I'd like to come to what Amadou said earlier in the comment section about the SEED project, which is the shirt which is behind him. I recently did a story about Fatou Diane, a young Senegalese girl who graduated, and I think is the first female to graduate from the SEED project and getting a degree at that level. And this is a young girl who is coming from Thies, not even Dakar. I hope I pronounced it well. Perhaps she didn't have any chance, absolutely, to study in a US college, but because of basketball, she came to the SEED project, studied, graduated, did well, went to the USA and is graduating, and she's now signing up for her master's degree. If it wasn't for basketball and sports in general and what she's learned from the game of basketball, she would never achieve this. So these are some of the stories that, if you tell with a face on them, it sinks in, to the parents, to every stakeholder, that it's very, very important to have sports in schools. And for me, really, especially for the girls, it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. I mean, the example you've just given us, I mean, there was something like that in Nigeria in the 70s and the 80s. There was a football competition known as the Principal's Cup. So secondary schools used to scout children from primary schools. And then those, when they were getting to their 5th form in secondary school, they were in turn scouted by universities. And, and that was, I think a lot of people would agree, the height of, Nigeria's powers in sport. So I think maybe all what we're saying is that we have to dig into our past and see what we did right at those times before, so we can start building again for the future. Kelechi, any last words from you, please?
I mean, they've said it all. We need to start from the grassroots, so bottom to the top. We need to invest in our sports. We need to invest in infrastructure. Government needs to get its acts right and ask themselves so many questions. Sports unites the nation, especially a very diverse nation like, unites the continent and the United Nations as well, especially a nation like Nigeria, which is very diverse. They also need to get their acts together. I'm happy that the current sports minister is doing okay. Hopefully, he will do better, and then the only way is up.
So,
thank you
sorry,
very much.
Kelechi, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Amadou.
No, I was just saying, Kelechi, please take that way to, we have Rivers Hoopers in the Basketball Africa League. So we will let you know at the finals. So look them up, you get your guys coming from
Absolutely. I'm sure he'll do that. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add something. Mm-hmm. as much as we'd like to get our talents coming through the system and ending up in America and Europe, for every one person that ends up in America, there's like 1,000 people who need to earn a living from playing sport. So it is very important for Africa to develop that ecosystem that enables as many people to earn a living from playing sport, from either playing or following their passion or working in one of the areas in the value chain of sport. We've got our children fixated on living, everybody living. And the big disappointment is that there are only just a handful that are going to be able to live. And then you find people get into a rut simply because there isn't anything for them to have here. So I'm glad to see people like Amadou, the NBA, coming here and saying an ecosystem can be built here that will support basketball on the continent and employ players, coaches, marketers, a complete ecosystem. All sport needs to be like that. So, you know, particularly
You're
football.
very right.
So
you're very right. I mean, because
focus Africa-wide.
Yeah.
And then the really, really good ones, we make it abroad. But let's create an ecosystem here for our people.
In fact, it just reminds me, you know, that even here in the UK, when you look at the football academies, professional football academies, 92% of the players who actually make it to those academies never get to even play in the third tier of English football, you know, and only 2% of those people in the academies actually get to play football in the Premier League. So you're very right. For every one person who does travel abroad, there are about 1,000 other people who will have to stay back, and those people have to be catered for as well. Thank you very much, Nkechi Obi, Usher, Komugisha, Dr. Kelechi, Amadou Fall, and Misha, Sher, of course. I can't forget you, my friend. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share your thoughts with us and on how we can move Africa towards being a sporting continent that can take its place anywhere in the world. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back now to Obi or to Nkiru. Back to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, guys. I thought it was a wonderful session. And Q, I don't know if you have anything to say. I just want to thank everybody for the session, and I'll be looking forward to when sports reopens post-COVID so we can come and see everybody.
No, sorry, I don't have anything to add. I thought it was excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. It was absolutely, I felt like I was educated again. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I hope that our guests enjoyed today. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Peter.
Indeed, very much.
All right.
Thank
you. Look forward to meeting all of you in person.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hope to see you at the Basketball Africa League launch.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
I'm coming with Kelechi.
Yeah.
Hey, make sure you bring the husband.
Kelechi, I
I
beg.
agreed to pay for my flight too. Hey.
Just throw your thing now.
Hey, we'll talk now. We'll talk.
Make sure you take my calls when I ask for tickets. And Misha, I need those t-shirts, please.
Okay, you got it. You got it.
Well done, Amadou. Well done.
Thank you, guys. No,
Well done,
done.
guys. Thanks a lot.
See all of you soon.
Bye. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Misha,
everybody.
thanks, man.
Ciao. Bye-bye.